There are lots of things you can spend your tax refund on, but one thing you don't have to spend it on, a new smartphone. Switch to Metro PCS now and get not one, but 2 free 4G LTE smartphones for brands like Samsung and LG. Plus, you're on T-Mobile's blazing fast nationwide 4G LTE network. Hurry! Switch to Metro PCS and get 2 free smartphones after instant rebate. One heck of a deal, only at Metro PCS. Limited time offer. Sales tax not included in phone price. Coverage and services not available everywhere. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, friends, to the 4th episode of the 2nd season of Heart to Heart with Anna, a show for the congenital heart defect community. Our purpose is to empower members of our community with resources, support, and advocacy information. Today's show is dealing with a long hospital stay. Critical congenital heart disease, or CCHD, is a term that refers to a group of serious heart defects that are present from birth. Although babies with CCHD may appear healthy for the first few hours or days of life, signs and symptoms soon become apparent. Children with CCHDs need surgery or other procedures within the first days or first year of life. They are at risk for death or disability if their heart defect is not detected soon after birth. The heart defects classified as CCHD may include, but are not limited to, one or more of the following: coarctation of the aorta, double outlet right ventricle, detransposition of the great arteries, Epstein anomaly, hypoplastic left heart syndrome, interrupted aortic arch, pulmonary atresia with intact septum, single ventricle, total anomalous pulmonary venous connection, tetralogy of Fallot, tricuspid atresia, and truncus arteriosus. How do families of children with critical congenital heart defects deal with a hospital stay that goes on for weeks or even months? How do you handle the healthy children left behind? How does this affect a marriage? What about work, insurance? Our show will feature the mother of a son with a CCHD, a teenager with a CCHD, and a child life specialist. We will discuss the different issues involved with a long hospital stay, including ways to help the family, the hospitalized child, and the family at large. That is why our topic today, dealing with a long hospital stay, is so important. To discuss this topic, our guests today are heart mom Callie Rickard, CHD survivor Alex Jaworski, and child life specialist Lynn Davis. Callie Rickard lives in Central Texas with her husband and 3 children. Her oldest son, DJ, age 11, was born with the CCHD Shone's complex and pulmonary hypertension, which required surgical intervention at just 4 days old. DJ underwent 5 open-heart surgeries to replace valves before his first birthday, as well as another at age 2 and his last at age 7. DJ has had many other surgeries and procedures and has had to cope with numerous complications. This has resulted in several long hospital stays as an infant, toddler, and older child. Child life specialist Lynn Davis was key in helping to make DJ's long hospital stays more bearable for him as well as for the rest of the family. We'll meet Alex Jaworski and Lynn Davis later in the show. Hi, Callie. Welcome to Heart with Anna. I'm so glad you could come back.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, I know that DJ has had many operations, so can you just tell us briefly about his longest hospitalization when he was an infant?
Yes. DJ was born in late June of 2003, and DJ was hospitalized 5 different times before his first birthday. His longest stay was for 17 weeks, from July until November. During that time, he was evaluated for a heart transplant, but it was decided by the doctors that he wouldn't be able to survive the wait for a new heart. So instead, we chose to replace his aortic valve with a flesh valve in hopes of buying him some time. And in doing so, they weren't able to fit the valve properly without cutting into his mitral valve, and that caused his mitral valve to fail severely. And so to help slow the fluid that began building up in his chest cavity, he had another surgery, a thoracic duct ligation, to give us some more time while they looked for another valve to replace his mitral valve with, and there just was no valve available. And so the doctors had a special valve that was created just for him by St. Jude's Hospital, and it was the smallest mechanical mitral valve ever placed in a baby at the time. And fitting that valve in such a small place as well caused the aortic valve to fail again, and then 4 days later he had his aortic valve replaced again with another flesh valve. So all of that happened during that 17-week hospital stay.
Wow, 17 weeks. That's huge.
It was.
So how old was he exactly when he had that one?
He was admitted at 5 weeks old and came home at about 4.5 months old.
Wow. Well, that must have been really challenging for you to have such a long hospital stay. And DJ is your firstborn child.
He is, yes. It was extremely difficult to have that long hospital stay because we just didn't know. The doctors didn't know. They couldn't give us any prognosis about, is any of this even going to work? It was kind of an experiment trying to see what they could do for him. Exactly.
I mean, for him to have the smallest mechanical valve, that's just amazing, but terrifying at the same time that they could do that. I'm happy that I have seen him as a healthy little boy, and so I know that the story has a happy ending, but you must have been terrified as a first-time parent.
I was, and I don't think I was allowed myself to feel it in the minute that it was happening. It was much later that it affected me, but in the moment of it all, you're under such stress and such shock. You just push through it because you're kind of like, this is what we have to do no matter what. So right. It's not like we have an option. Right. And some of these kids who are so sick, you just have to push through because you're right, there is no option. And there's also no guidebook. There's nothing that says, oh, well, people who have DJ's heart defect, because DJ's a snowflake. He has his own special, unique heart defect that really isn't like anybody else's. Right, right. I haven't met anyone exactly like him, but they do share similarities with some other kids I've known. But you're right, he seems unique in his exact case, as a lot of our kids do. Mm-hmm. Tell me about DJ's longest hospital stay when he was a young child. As an infant, he probably didn't have any idea of what was going on. But DJ has had surgery as a little boy where he actually would know what was going on with him. Right. He had his last open heart surgery was at age 7, and he definitely knew what was going on then. We've prepared him for months. But that stay, it's kind of weird. Same time of year. He was admitted in August of 2010, and he was there until November. So, again, a big chunk of time. I didn't do the math of the weeks, but August, September, October, that's about 3.5, 4 months. And he was admitted for severe congestive heart failure, endocarditis, and pneumonia. And during that time, he was being evaluated for heart and double lung transplant because his valve was failing again. It had calcified and got real narrow and wasn't working properly. And with the complication of severe pulmonary hypertension, they couldn't just do heart transplant. They needed to evaluate for heart and double lung, but he was turned down for being too high risk. So as a last-ditch option, we chose to try to replace his aortic valve again. We were told it's an extremely risky surgery because it would be his 8th valve replaced with scar tissue and previous complications. We weren't real confident that we'd have a good outcome. And 3 days after that surgery, he suffered a massive cerebral hematoma, which is a spontaneous bleeding of the brain tissue. And he needed to have 2 brain surgeries to clear blood before he was able to wake up and breathe on his own. And that's when the doctors kind of began preparing us for a really long rehabilitation schedule. So that happened during that 3.5, 4 month span of him being inpatient.
Well, as a 7-year-old, he must have been aware of how sick he was and of the fact that he was being evaluated for a lot of different things. It must have been pretty scary for him.
If he was scared, he didn't show it to me too much. He knew that he was sick. He knew that he wasn't feeling good. But at the same time, I wasn't keeping information from him. And I was explaining what was going on the whole time, why we're doing these things. He always knew he had a heart problem. And we told him, how we explained it to him was, you had a part replaced when you were 2, and now you're 7, you're a big boy, you need a big boy part now. Your little boy part is just too small, now you're bigger. And he kind of was like, oh, okay. And I said, the doctors are here helping you, the nurses are helping you. He's very extremely compliant when they would come and maintain his PICC line, or even with NG tube for speeding tube in his nose. He never complained or fought or cried. He knew he was sick, and he knew he was getting help.
And it sounds to me like, because you were very matter-of-fact, that's exactly how I worked with Alex, too, was there's no need in making them afraid. You're at the best hospital you can be at for them. You've gotten the best doctors you can. They've beaten the odds already in the past, and all you could do is hope for the best with the future. And for Alex especially, it sounds like DJ maybe was the same way. It was better for me to explain, this is what's going to happen. Okay, you're going to have a catheterization, and they're going to be sticking this tube in your body. And the more matter-of-fact and more honest I could be about what was happening, and even to the point of saying, it's going to hurt when they stick the IV in you, but we're going to get some EMLA cream, and we'll try and dull it as much as possible, but it may hurt a little bit. But once it's in for a while, hopefully it won't be so bad. And then just moving on from there and just being there with him, because it's not like we could change the course of their lives. They were born with these funky hearts, and changes had to be made in order for them to survive.
Right, exactly. And I think with him in particular, all those ICU nurses and all the staff, same doctors, same surgeons, same anesthesiologists, they all remembered him from being an infant and a toddler. And so to him, he felt comforted by, all these people know me, and they're all excited to see me because they're impressed with how well I've done so far, and they're trying to help me again. It's he almost felt like a mini celebrity while he was there, because everyone would come and say, oh, look, it's DJ. How are you doing? And so he felt good. And even with Child Life, they remembered him as being an infant, and so that made DJ feel good too, because it almost felt sort of like an air of family.
Yeah, I feel like Alex was so lucky because he experienced the same thing. He had his first 2 surgeries when he was a baby, and like DJ, they probably just don't remember very much of that, but Alex went back as a 17-year-old, and like DJ, he was able to go back with the same surgeon, the same anesthesiologist, some of the same doctors, some of the same nurses, and they treated him like family, just like you're saying. And I think that helps when the professionals can put the children at ease by making them feel like we care about you, we love you, which is how I really feel the people did feel about my son. I think that makes it a little bit easier, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. And just even for myself to have that support, because I was there alone with DJ a lot, and DJ was in a medically induced coma for a long time, so it was just me kind of socializing with all those nurses, and so we became really good friends because I would talk with them every single day. I never left, hardly at all. I would spend the night in the recliner, and so they were a support system for me as well, because I didn't have family that was able to come in and spend very much time with me while we were there.
So I felt the same way. Although I was lucky because my mom and dad were nearby, and they did come, and that does make a huge difference. But can you share with our listeners maybe some ways that, or just some tips to help handle having a child in the hospital for such a long time? It's really different when the baby is only in the hospital for a week or two, and even that feels like forever. But when the stay goes on and on and on, and weeks melt into a month, it's got to be so trying. So how about if you share with us a few tips on how parents can stay sane while their children are in, or it's babies. Let's start with babies, while their babies are in the hospital for such an extended stay.
I don't know if I exactly stayed sane, but when DJ was a baby, I guess the way that I personally was able to cope with him being there for so long is educating myself mainly on what was going on with him and how to take care of him. And then to ease all that, that's a really heavy time of your life when they're little babies. And so Child Life would bring things in like they brought a light show for the ceiling, and they would bring in soft music to kind of keep the atmosphere relaxed for us. We were able to have a room alone, and that kind of helped a lot. They would bring things like a mobile. I would take a lot of pictures of him. That helped me immensely to have pictures. And when he began to smile and interact with toys, and I was able to finally hold him again, I wasn't able, as a baby, to go home and switch with my husband like we were when he was older. So every day that DJ was in the hospital for those 17 weeks, I was there too. I never went home. When I had to leave his room to go to get something to eat, they had an amazing volunteer program there at my hospital where older women were volunteering to come in and hold the babies. So I didn't have to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm leaving him alone. And I could let someone else hold him and cuddle him and rock with him while I ran and grabbed some lunch or something. But being in the hospital is a very isolating feeling. A lot of people in my life in particular were a little put off by us being in the hospital and felt like they needed to give us some space. So that was really difficult for me. It was.
Sometimes it's easier for a stranger because they don't know the emotional baggage that comes with the family. Well, it sounds like your hospital had a lot of great programs, and I know Christus Santa Rosa, where Alex had his last hospital stay, they also had, they called them volunteer grandmas that would go around and stay with the kids, and everybody called them grandma. Even the nurses would call them grandma, which I thought was really neat because there were like 5 grandmas on the unit, but that was really, really helpful. And I love all the things that you said that Child Life did. We'll actually have Lynn on later and be able to talk to her about some specific things that she feels are important that she does. So what about advice that you could give to parents whose older children, or still a young child but older than a baby, are having to do when they have a long hospital stay?
Right, because when DJ was 7, we had 2 younger children. By that time, they were ages 5, 6, and 7. So my 5- and 6-year-old were in kindergarten at the time, and they did have a very difficult time coping. And the way that I was helping them was I was explaining, like I said, don't keep things from them because they kind of make it up in their minds scarier than what it could be. So I told them the same thing about DJ is getting help. He's getting a big boy part, that whole thing. And another thing that we did was we set up our laptop next to DJ's bed so that Dan and I would switch. My husband and I would switch back and forth. I would stay in the hospital 3 or 4 days with DJ and then go home. Dan would come in and stay 3 or 4 days, and then we'd go back and forth. So the kids at home got to see us both. And so while we were home, we would have Skype set up on our laptops so the kids at home could see DJ at the hospital and they could talk back and forth, and our kids at home would go get the cat and say, look, here's Sweetie, our cat, or they'd run out in the yard and grab a chicken, and DJ loved that he could see things from home. Like, there's my favorite chicken. And the kids at home would draw pictures for DJ, and DJ would hang them up on his wall next to his bed. And on our switch days, they got to see each other for an hour or two, so they would play video games together and talk and sit in the bed with DJ, and that kind of made him feel like he still has a connection with his brother and sister.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so important. I don't think 19 years ago when Alex was an infant, I had Joey who was 3, and they did not want us to bring Joey up to the hospital. In fact, we were forbidden from bringing him in certain places. They were so afraid of the germs that a young preschool-age child could bring. But I don't think that they realize how much importance those siblings play in the lives of these children. And I know that even in the 7 months between Alex's surgeries, it was still 19 years ago, but I did get permission from the surgeon to bring Joey up to see Alex after Alex was extubated. And that made such a huge difference. He had been in the hospital for 3 days. I had been there all 3 days. Finally, he was extubated, and I was talking to him, and I was telling him that Daddy was going to bring Joey up, and they would be here any minute. And then within minutes, Joey was at the door, and Alex turned his head to look at Joey, and Joey got the first smile in 3 days. And I thought, wait a minute, I've been here all 3 days. But there's just something so special between the bond between siblings, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. They're so close. And with my kids being within 2 years of each other, they are, even today, they're the best of friends. They do everything together. So it was very, very important that DJ could feel that connection. When he was in ICU and he was intubated, of course, we weren't able to bring the kids in, but he spent a lot of time out on the regular floor, and that's when he got more interaction with his brother and sister, not as much in ICU, understandably, because there's a lot of germs, like you said, even with other patients. But we were lucky at our hospital. They had something called the Starlight Lounge, and what that was a family area that had a kitchen, but it also had a bay of computers and games like the Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo 64 where they could all play games together. And so DJ would always look forward to being able to go down there. And they also had a movie theater once a week where they would play a movie. And if DJ was feeling well enough, we could go down the hall and watch a movie, and he'd always look forward to that. But he wasn't always well enough to make the walk down the hallway.
Right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show with me again, Callie, and for sharing your experiences and advice with us. Now it's time for us to take a commercial break, but don't leave because you know you'll be coming back on later in the show. And for our listeners, coming up we have an adult congenital heart defect survivor, and find out how he dealt with having a long hospital stay when he was a teenager, having a Fontan revision, when we return to Heart with Anna.
Anna Jaworski has written several books to empower the congenital heart defect, or CHD, community. These books can be found at Amazon.com or at her website, www.babyheartspress.com. Her bestseller is The Heart of a Mother, an anthology of stories written by women for women in the CHD community. Anna's other books, My Brother Needs an Operation, The Heart of a Father, and Hypoplastic Left Heart Syndrome, a handbook for parents, will help you understand that you are not alone. Visit babyheartspress.com to find out more.
Welcome back to our show, Heart to Heart with Anna, a show for the congenital heart defect community. Today we're talking with Heart Mom Callie Rickard, adult CHD survivor Alex Jaworski, and child life specialist Lynn Davis about dealing with a long hospital stay. We just finished talking with Callie about her experience with having her son DJ in the hospital for much of his early life, and now we will turn our attention to Alex Jaworski. Alex Jaworski was born August 11, 1994, and was initially diagnosed with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, although he had an unusual assortment of heart defects, which included transposition of the great arteries and a hypoplastic left ventricle. He had his first 2 open-heart surgeries, a modified Blalock-Taussig shunt and a fenestrated Fontan procedure, before his first birthday, and then went 16 years without needing surgery. By the time Alex was 17, he had developed an aortic aneurysm, which had been growing in size for several years. His last open-heart surgery, a Fontan conversion, aortic aneurysm surgery, and modified Mays procedure, had the longest hospital stay of the 3 surgeries he had. As a 17-year-old patient in a children's hospital, Alex had an unusual experience, but he wasn't the oldest patient on the ward. Another Fontan patient was having a procedure done as well, and that patient was 19. We'll meet Lynn Davis in our third segment. Thank you for coming on Heart to Heart with Anna, Alex.
Hi, glad to be here.
So, Alex, it was so different for you to be in the hospital as a 17-year-old since you didn't even remember those first surgeries you had. How long were you actually in the hospital when you were 17?
It was for 26 days.
Yeah, that's a long time. Yeah. So when you had your last surgery, that was the longest time ever for you to be in a hospital, and it was the first time for you to actually remember being in a hospital. What kind of advice could you give to other teenagers who are about to have open heart surgery themselves to help them deal with that long hospital stay?
I would say bring something like a book or some video games, because they do want you to get up and walk around to exercise, because that does help with the recovery, but you still spend a lot of time just lying in bed, and you have to have something to take your mind off it. You have to have some sort of distraction, something to just fill in all of that time, because it's not fun to just lie there.
I know.
So bring something to read or a video game or something.
Yeah, I think that was one of the hardest things was you were not used to being down that long, were you?
No, not at all.
You lead a pretty active life, and to all of a sudden be, I won't say confined to bed, but you don't feel too well after you have that open heart surgery, and you really don't have the energy to get up and walk around much, do you?
No, do not.
So I think that was a good suggestion, bringing the books, video games. You also loved it when we brought movies. And for those of our listeners who may not recognize it, Alex is my son. So I know about this hospitalization very well since I was there with him as well. So, yeah, I think the movies helped a lot too, don't you think?
Absolutely.
So I know you were a challenge for your child life specialist at Krista Santa Rosa because she wasn't accustomed to having children, and you weren't really a child. You were a young adult by that time.
Right.
On her ward, she was really accustomed more to having babies, and aside from you and that other young man, everybody else was babies. I think I saw maybe one toddler, one child that was maybe 2 or 3 years old.
There was that one boy, Clay. He was a year or two younger than me.
That's right. So, so there were 3 of you that were teenagers at that time. A 19-year-old, at that time you were 17. And you're right, I think Clay was 15 because I know he was in high school. So what advice would you give to a child life specialist who is having to deal with teenagers on her ward, especially when they're not accustomed maybe to having older boys on the ward?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what they do for younger kids, but I can say that for us, we were okay with just sitting down and watching a movie, and they made us popcorn and let us just enjoy that. We didn't need like a very involved activity to help us out, to help us during that time. We were just okay with hanging out with each other and talking and watching a movie together, and just she got us Pirates of the Caribbean at one point, and me and Clay watched that together, and that was great.
Yeah.
To just have movies more suited for teenagers.
Right, because the movies in the library, they were not catered to teenagers. They were really young movies. But, you're not as lucky as what it sounds like DJ was. DJ had the Starlight Lounge. You didn't really have that, but they did convert the Child Life room by putting the sheet up so that they could project the movie onto the sheet, so it was bigger than just watching it on your laptop computer. And you really did seem to enjoy that with Clay. Having the popcorn especially, that always makes your movie experience a little bit better, don't you think?
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
So what kinds of things can parents of teenagers do, especially older teens like you were, to help make the hospital stay bearable and to keep you in a healthy mental state while you're there?
That's hard to say. I know I didn't like having many people around when I was in the hospital, and you were good about making sure that not many people came in and bothered me. I didn't really want my friends or anyone seeing me there. And you made sure I walked around and did exercise, so that helped with the recovery. But I think it helps for teenagers to have some space there because it's not enjoyable at all. And you don't like having people there. You don't like people getting in your space. And it's just very difficult to deal with all of that. So personally, I prefer to just have not many people there, to have my own time and space. It's really hard to say because you can't just leave us completely alone. We're not quite old enough for that. But
well, and you wouldn't want to be totally alone because don't you think that makes the time drag on even longer?
That would, yes. But also it's difficult having anyone there, It's it's a tough situation all around.
It is a tough situation because when you sign in, you don't know if it's going to be a short hospital stay or a long hospital stay. You don't know it's a long hospital stay until it is a long hospital stay. And then what can you do? I think we tried mentally to prepare ourselves and to prepare you for it, but it sounds to me like what you're saying is that parents need to listen to their teens. And if their teens don't want a lot of visitors, we need to honor our teens' wishes and just really go with what is right for them, because some people are very social and they may need and crave attention from other people just to help get them through the hospitalization. But that was not you. That was not what you wanted.
Not me, but
right. So to honor what that person. Right. Okay. Well, I think that's good advice, Alex. I appreciate you sharing your experience with us. I know you don't like to talk about yourself very much, and I know talking about that time is also a bit of a challenge because that was a really tough time in your life, don't you think?
Yeah, not fun at all. I get through it, though.
You did get through it, and I was really proud of you for the way that you did handle that. You kept your spirits up as much as you could, and you did get out there and exercise even when it was painful because you knew that's what you had to do in order to get better. So thanks for coming on the show, Alex. Stay tuned because we will come back in the end section, and you'll be on with Lynn and Callie. But now we have to go to a commercial break, and when we come back, we will have a child life specialist who actually worked with DJ and Callie Rickard when they were in the hospital so many years ago. Find out what she felt was important for her to do when we return to Heart with Anna.
Anna Jaworski has spoken around the world at congenital heart defect events, and she is available as a keynote or guest speaker for your event. Go to hearttoheartwithanna.com to learn more about booking Anna for your event. You can also find out more about the radio program, keep up to date with CHD resources and information about advocacy groups, as well as read Anna's weekly blog. Anna wants you to stay well connected and participate in the CHD community. Visit hearttoheartwithanna.com today.
Welcome back to our show, Heart to Heart with Anna, a show for the congenital heart defect community. Today we are talking with Heart Mom Callie Rickard, adult congenital heart defect survivor Alex Jaworski, and child life specialist Lynn Davis about dealing with a long hospital stay. We just finished talking with Alex about his experience with having to be in the hospital following a Fontan revision and other surgeries. Now we will turn our attention to child life specialist Lynn Davis. Lynn Davis has been a certified child life specialist at Randall Children's Hospital in Portland, Oregon for 15 years. She works primarily with patients in a pediatric intensive care unit where she meets the emotional, social, and developmental needs of patients and their families. She provides medical play preparation and support for surgery and procedures to help children become more comfortable with the hospital setting. She uses therapeutic play to promote the expression of feelings and fears and to normalize the hospital. Her goal is to relieve stress and anxiety to enhance the emotional well-being of the patient and family. Welcome to the show, Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it, Anna.
Well, I am so excited, Lynn. I have heard about you. You may not know this, but I've actually heard about you for months, ever since Kelly and I became friends. You were very, very instrumental in her life and in helping DJ. So she was so excited when she heard I was going to do this episode, and she said, oh, my goodness, you have to contact Lynn Davis. So thank you so much for coming on the air.
Oh, absolutely. So, my pleasure.
I know this is like a reunion here in a few minutes when we're on together. Right. So what do you think is the number one thing that you do to help a child and that child's family when they're in the hospital and the stay goes from days into weeks and maybe even into months?
You know, I think one of the most important things is relationship. It's so important to build that rapport with the children as well as with the patients, with the families, because if you are, you develop a special relationship when you see these families and these kiddos, you know, day in and day out. And I think for them to see familiar faces is very important, and to just have that ongoing relationship that they know this person is here for me. This person is here, and they care about me. And I think, you know, like Callie had mentioned about how the staff, I think that stands out to both the patients and the parents, just when they know that the staff really does care and it goes just beyond the job. It is something that they do with their heart, and you develop those special relationships. So I think that's to me number one, is just that important key relationship that you have with the family and the kiddos.
And so do you start to cultivate that relationship from day one? Because how do we know if the hospital stay is going to be a long one or a short one? It could be 3 days. It could be 3 months.
Absolutely. That's something that from the minute I meet a child, you know, and their family, that's what I want to develop, is that rapport. And, of course, for kids, it's going to look a little different in that I'm going to bring in Thomas the Train for them because that's their favorite thing, and sit down and play Thomas with them, or sit down and have heart-to-hearts with the parents and just be available. And the beauty of it going from days to weeks to months is that relationship deepens. And so when you have that foundation of where you're getting to know the family and getting to know them, and so then that relationship can deepen, and then they can see how your intervention can support them. They can start to trust you with working with their child, with talking with them. So it actually, that piece doesn't change, but it just becomes, I think, more solid over time. And so that's just one thing that is, I think, a really important thing. There's many other things that are important, but that's a key thing, I believe.
I think so, too. I know that Kelly and I have talked a little bit about how you helped her family when DJ was in the hospital, especially when he was 7, because that's a totally different experience. Dealing with a 7-year-old child versus an infant is a really different experience. So what do you remember being important to DJ when you first met him versus an infant, but then later as an older child?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it was amazing that having been at Randall for that period of time, I did have that blessing of being able to see DJ as a baby and then again as a 7-year-old. And not everybody has that. And I think that, is so meaningful. So I think more when he was 7, I was, my focus was, first of all, what is his understanding as a 7-year-old about, like, what his experience is? And I remember, we did do some medical play, and just I think he had a good understanding of why he needed the surgery and how things were going to help. But of course, for him, it was, we laughed and played a lot. Because DJ is just, talk about the biggest heart, and he is a little jokester. And so we would, he's just awesome. And, but, DJ would, I remember he loved to, play Mario Kart and video games, but we'd also just bring in things that, to remember what we played with, but we just played a lot and we hung out, and it was just that relationship that he got to where he knew that I was there for him, that I didn't really need, I didn't need to do anything to him, but I was just there to help him. And kids quickly understand that, and they get that, and they're like, oh, now I know why you're here.
Right. You're not one that's going to be flushing any lines or making any pokes or, doing anything that is uncomfortable. You were there just for fun. And that, I think you're able to establish a really neat relationship with the kids because of that. You're kind of a relief for them. When you walk in the door, they know it's nothing scary that's going to happen to them. And I love how you say that you enjoyed laughing together, because that's actually something that Callie and I talked about, and how important laughter is for healing.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is. And I think so important because it is hard when the children are in pain or they're, having discomfort. It's hard to have them kind of see outside of what they're experiencing right at that moment. And so I know I'd find different ways. I think, we'd even play little jokes on the nurses and just anything that you could do to kind of have them engage that's not something about what they're going through, but just about who they are outside of the hospital.
Right.
And that's my thing, just who they are, because this doesn't define them. It is something that they go through, but it doesn't define them. It's not who they are. It's something that they're facing, and they are just amazingly brave through the whole thing, and they get through it. But to be who they are on the other end, and to not lose that, but to be able to reconnect with, this is what you like to do. This is who you are. Like Callie said, with connecting with the siblings is so important, because that's a big part of their life. That's a huge part. And I know, I was so glad when the kids would be able to come in and see him. He lit up. He just would light up. And so that's definitely something that we encourage, is that connection with home and familiar and things that are who they are outside of being a child in the hospital.
Oh, I just love that, because you are so right. And I think maybe that's why, as a 17-year-old, Alex didn't want people there, because he didn't want that small period of his life, and it seemed like a long period, but in relationship to the number of years he had been alive, it was a small segment of his life. That's not who he wanted his friends to picture him as, because that's not how he defined himself. So I think that's very intuitive of you, and to help them to remember, this isn't who I am. This is only temporary. Who I really am is that jokester. Who I really am is the person who likes to have fun and play Mario Kart with somebody. So I love that. I think that's really healing, and I think that is something that will help to make that hospitalization endurable, because it feels like it's going on forever when you're there for the multiple weeks. It's such a hard time to go through. So I have one more question before we go to a commercial break, and that is, what can parents do, or what should they be ever mindful of when the child's hospital stay does extend? Because like I said before, when you put your child in a hospital, you have no idea if it's just going to be for a few days or maybe a week or 2 weeks. And even 2 weeks feels like a really long time. But when it extends into more weeks than that, I mean, for Callie, 17 weeks, I can't even imagine that. What should parents be mindful of to help make that experience as healthy as possible?
I think one of the most important things, if possible, is trying to keep the family as a family and trying to bring in the brothers and sisters as much as possible, because for kids, again, that is their world. Their world is their family and friends and even pets. You know, we have kids that we have a pet therapy program, but we also encourage, especially for longer, kids that are staying for weeks, we encourage them to bring in their own dog, you know, if they have an animal at home. And so that is just, I recently had a boy who was in there with kind of a newer major heart issue as a teenager, and they would alternate bringing in his dog. And he just, they would just get on the bed with him and sleep, just like they did at home. And so it was just amazing, and how healing this was for this, you know, he's 13, and so for this boy, and then also for him, I think having peers, if you're wanting them, right, having your friends come and be able to visit you, or if you can go outside of the ICU and do that, if often hospitals don't necessarily allow friends, but they will family. But I think really it's maintaining as much normalcy as possible as you can, bringing in pictures, things from home. Also, I think what's good is trying to develop routines and schedules is a good thing, so that kids know, you know, from day to day what to expect. And if they're able
really
to,
good.
Yeah, this is I think once they're able to kind of get a little more into routine, to be able to, if it's during the school year, like we have a school program at our hospital, so when I do a schedule, I'll have school time on there, and that might be in the room school. It may not be that they attend the school, but the teacher comes and works with them. I'll put on there our hospital bingo, which I remember DJ loves hospital bingo and movie night. And so I incorporate all of those things onto their schedule, as well as like the pet therapy visit, as well as physical therapy, or, you know, occupational therapy, you know, speech therapy, or cares. And that's something I like to be involved in, too, is any procedures. That's, of course, very important in our role, is to help kids to come up with a plan for how they're going to cope during a procedure. So whether it's, you know, a line being taken out, or a drain, or a dressing change on a line, or something, on some kind of a access that they have for their medication. And so you can incorporate those things so people aren't randomly coming into their room and saying, okay, well, right now we're going to do this, when they're like, wait, I just started my movie. So I think those are
right. I like that. Yeah, and we did that with Alex, too. We actually had a whiteboard in his room, and we could write down certain things that were going to happen at certain times. So you're right. So you could know that you had a 2-hour block of time where you could watch a movie or get on the phone with your friend. For Alex as a teenager, it was important for him to have his cell phone so he could text and call people when he wanted to, and his brother could call him. So I think that's really important too. Well, thank you, Lynn. You gave us lots of good information. We do need to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll have all three of you together. We'll all be talking with some callers, if we get any callers. We actually just got someone in our chat room, so I'll find out if they have, and then we'll be right back. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you.
Anna Jaworski has written several books to empower the congenital heart defect, or CHD, community. These books can be found at Amazon.com or at her website, www.babyheartspress.com. Her bestseller is The Heart of a Mother, an anthology of stories written by women for women in the CHD community. Anna's other books, My Brother Needs an Operation, The Heart of a Father, and Hypoplastic Left Heart Syndrome, a handbook for parents, will help you understand that you are not alone. Visit babyheartspress.com to find out more.
Welcome back to our show, Heart to Heart with Anna, a show for the congenital heart defect community. Today we are talking with heart mom Callie Rickard, adult CHD survivor Alex Jaworski, and child life specialist Lynn Davis about dealing with a long hospital stay. We've heard from Callie about being a parent of a baby and then a young child who had an extended hospital stay after open heart surgery. We also heard from Alex about ways that people can help teens who have long hospital stays following open heart surgery. And we just heard from Lynn Davis about what it's like to be a child life specialist and what she does to help children and families when they are in the hospital, even for weeks or months at a time. Now we get to take questions from our listening audience. So please call me at 646-200-4809 if you have a question for one of our guests, or if you even have a comment, something you would like to share. So I will be watching for any callers that we might have, but in the meantime, I do want to thank Callie, Alex, and Lynn for coming on Heart to Heart with Anna to talk about this very important issue. I know that many members of our congenital heart defect community will be able to relate to the stories that all of you have shared and will gain some strength from what you told them today, some of the advice that you have given us. I really love some of the things that Lynn said about trying to make that hospital stay as normal as possible. I know that we tried to do that for Alex with his hospital stays, and I think that does make the time go by a little bit faster when you have schedules and routines, and I know that it makes a big difference when you can bring those siblings in. I love what Lynn said about bringing pets in. I can just imagine Domino in the hospital with you. Can't you, Alex?
Absolutely.
She would have jumped right on the bed with you, wouldn't she?
Yeah. She would be good about that.
Yeah, I don't think she would have had any problem. Even though it was a strange place, all she would have needed to see was you, and she would have been right up there with you. So I love that Lynn said to go ahead, bring some of those pets in, and I'm happy to hear that maybe more hospitals are open to something like that. That was not something that was ever recommended to us, and we lived 3 hours away from the hospital, so our dogs weren't with us anyway. They were being cared for by other people, but I do think, especially for an extended stay, that would have been helpful. In fact, Alex, I remember you saying that you missed Domino. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I did. I did say that, yeah.
For those of you listening, Domino is his beautiful dog that he's had. Gosh, Alex, when did you get Dommy?
I think it was 2001. It was the year after he came back to Texas.
Right, so you were, you were 8 years old, I think, when we got her?
Yep.
That's a long time to have a dog, and I can imagine that would have been helpful as a therapeutic tool, and I wish I had thought about that.
Oh, yeah.
So, Callie and Lynn, I am going to give you a minute to greet each other because I know this is kind of like a reunion.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Callie.
DJ was so excited to hear that you were going to be talking with us today, and he was like, do I get to talk on the phone too to Lynn? He remembers you so fondly.
Oh, my goodness. You guys are such a special family, and we spent a lot of time together, didn't we?
We did.
Oh, we do. We have some good memories during a difficult time, I think.
I asked him if he remembered playing with you, and he said, of course. I remember playing Battleship with Lynn, and she let me win, and he remembers when he came back to the hospital after he was discharged. I think he was out for a few months, and he came back, and you guys ran up the hallway, and he was so proud of himself he could run with you.
Oh, I remember that. Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah, just so many special. I remember, you know, he just can light up a room. That boy, his smile, and every time I'd come in, you know, I could always tell what kind of day he was having. You know, by if that smile would, you know, be as bright as possible. If it was a little dimmer, it was like, what's going on, buddy? What's going on? And try and then say, okay, let's try and change this day up. Let's do something different. Let's do something fun. Or how can we help your day be better? Or how can we address what's bothering you? And he's just so amazing. So amazing. And you, my goodness, seeing you, Callie, every day, you didn't leave his side. And that was just, I mean, that love that you have, like so many, you know, parents do, that they just can't imagine being any place else but right by their child when they're facing, you know, and especially with what DJ went through. But it was so inspirational. I just want you to know that, just seeing how much you guys, all the love that your family had for each other and for DJ, it was apparent to everybody.
Yeah, you were the only one that was there when they gave me a lot of bad news, and I remember you holding my hand. It was after hours even when he was in emergency brain surgery, and that meant so much to me. You'll never know, Lynn. Thank you for being there for me, and for being there for DJ, because he still remembers you so well. And you know, you mentioned that you guys would play tricks on the nurses. He remembers that. You know, you set up that motion detector at the door, so when the nurse would come in, it would make silly noises, and the nurse would be like, what was that? And you guys would laugh together. So,
yeah.
And he remembers doing puzzles with you. We still have a lot of that artwork that you guys did together, even 4 years later.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Oh, yeah, well, I you know, we don't forget. You know, we don't forget. You know, I think sometimes people think, well, staff sees so many kids and so many families, but we don't forget. We honestly don't. And especially, you know, with how, you know, with kids that are there for long time, for longer periods of time, it's like you guys, you get close to our hearts, and so we don't forget your families, your children. We remember all the time, and those memories and those times just are close to our hearts, you know. So I was so you know, I'm just so thankful that you know, I was able to be there, and I wouldn't have wanted to be any other place than helping you and holding your hand at those times. You know, at that time when he had that emergency, you know, the brain surgery. It was such a difficult time.
And I just wanted to let you know he's fully recovered now. He's going to be 11 years old next Monday. Is his 11th birthday. So he's a big old guy now. But he has no ill effects from any of that surgery. His heart is doing great. Lungs are doing great. There's no recommendation for surgery at all right now or since we saw you. He has no brain damage at all.
Oh, my God. I mean, that's a miracle. It's amazing. It's just,
right, because he woke up. I remember
you
playing Wii with him, and he was left-sided paralysis, if you remember, and he couldn't quite do the Wii, but he runs, he rides a bike, he can do flips on the trampoline. He's just like any other regular, you know, 11-year-old. He's going to start 4th grade next year. And
And he's an honor student. I get to brag on him. He's an honor student this year, Lynn. He has just done beautifully. Yes, he has. He's really catching up, and his teachers are so pleased with his progress. And that's because Callie and Dan do such a good job of providing a very nurturing environment for those kids. And despite the fact that they went through so many hospitalizations with DJ, you would never know it to meet these kids. They act just like normal siblings. It really is quite inspiring to see. And you started to say the word miracle, Lynn. It is miraculous. What DJ has been through and how he's recovered as fully as he has, I don't think it's anything short of a miracle.
It absolutely is. It's absolutely a miracle. I mean, to see, and when you're there, and like Callie and Dan and the staff, you see how devastated, how sick they are, and you hear news that is so difficult and so serious and not great outcome potentially, and then to see how he's doing now and how he just defied everything is just nothing short of a miracle. It really.
Well, I'm so glad that I was able to bring the two of you together, and I appreciate Alex coming on and giving us a perspective of what it's like to be a teen in the hospital. I can't believe it, ladies, but our hour is up. So that concludes our episode. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the episode of Heart to Heart with Anna. Please come back next week when our topic will be sports for boys with critical congenital heart defects. It will be airing at noon Eastern Time on Tuesday. Until then, please find and like us on Facebook. Check out our website, hearttoheartwithanna.com, and our Cafe Press Boutique. There's a tab that you can click on right on the website. And remember, my friends, there is hope.
There are lots of things you can spend your tax refund on, but one thing you don't have to spend it on, a new smartphone. Switch to Metro PCS now and get not one, but two free 4G LTE smartphones for brands like Samsung and LG. Plus, you're on T-Mobile's blazing fast nationwide 4G LTE network. Hurry! Switch to Metro PCS and get two free smartphones after instant rebate. One heck of a deal, only at Metro PCS. Limited time offer. Sales tax not included in phone price. Coverage and services not available everywhere. See store for details and terms and conditions.